Is this volume okay? Yes? Cool.
A little louder.
A little louder? Cool.
Right here, no.
Okay, sounds good. The plan is the Islamic Republic of Iran to build a nuclear weapons arsenal. Background: 1. Iran building a nuclear arsenal is inevitable. It is only a question of when they build it. We argue it is key for Iran to build a nuclear arsenal now. A. Iran is not receptive to democracy due to recent developments in West Asia. They view the development of nuclear weapons as a necessity given the aggressiveness of the United States and Israel in the region. This tracks with historical developments as well. Any country that is bent on developing a nuclear weapon usually develops them at some point or another. Look to the US versus USSR or North Korea and all the other examples in the world. But B. Some intelligence estimates that as early as this past October assert that Iran could have enough enriched weapons-grade uranium for a bomb within a week and enough for 5 bombs within 6 weeks. 2. Iran currently has a proxy network in the region. A. Means they can immediately conduct calculated negotiations within West Asia. But 3. There are 2 independent reasons that the Iranian government can create nuclear weapons. A. The nation stockpile has enough uranium to create 8 to 10 nuclear bombs. Or B. The nation also holds enough plutonium to also create another one. Advantage 1. Uniqueness: 1. Conflicts in Yemen have been occurring inside the nation's borders since 2010. A. Consider the worst humanitarian crisis in the globe. B. Over 25 million people need some form of aid, usually in the form of food or water, where millions of children are currently facing famine-level starvation. But 2. Saudi Arabia uniquely contributing to ongoing genocide. A. Over 400,000 have died and 11,000 children. B. The UNDP reports estimates 1.3 million people have died will die by 2030. But C. Aid crisis occurring in the school as a result of the conflict. Little odd here is that humanitarian agencies have attempted to get aid to the citizens, but still located within the border since 2014. However, armed groups have severely restricted their work. D. Especially after COVID-19, restrictions on humanitarian food and aid, water aid, have been rising. Little odd here is that millions of civilians have both died from restricted food and water. But 2 here is that because health aid is not being allowed into Yemen's borders, the healthcare system is on the brink of collapse under the rapid threat of illness, where millions have died from cholera outbreaks. Links. 1. Iran expanding nuclear weapons signals to the region that they will be peacekeepers. Little a here is that increase in Iranian power and hard power and influence. But 2. Iran wants Saudi out of Yemen. Little a here is that Iran political ties with Yemen means they always side with them for future prosperity. But B. Having nukes is the biggest hard power in the West Asia region. 3. Diffuses conflicts in Saudi Arabia doesn't want to go head with Iran, since they know this will make more conflict in the future due to power imbalance. Internal links. 1. Diffusing the conflict allows for humanitarian aid to enter Yemen. A. This is solvent. An EU report identified that 67% of Yemeni citizens, or about 21.6 million people, are in dire need of resources that we can provided by aid. B. This is particularly solvent with regard to food and healthcare. Little odd here that 17 million are in food insecurity in the Yemen and the status quo. A recent report found that food aid is the most effective because it requires minimal intervention and is widely distributable. But 2 is that millions also need healthcare. Aid helps to quell cholera outbreaks and other illnesses in the region. Impacts: 1. Genocide. A. Saudi invasion of Yemen is targeted, especially against the Yemenis people. The 2. Structural violence. A. Cycles of poverty and structural violence because Yemeni people lose homes, families, livelihoods, and are stuck in constant cycles of poverty. But 3. Starvation. People are currently facing massive amounts of food insecurity and will die as a result. 4. Disease. The massive need in healthcare and lack of healthcare infrastructure means that the cholera outbreaks become more frequent in the future. Advantage 2. Uniqueness: 1. Israel is the only nuclear actor in the region. A. No other states in West Asia has access to nuclear weapons in the status quo. 2. Israel's war in Gaza has had a tremendous toll on both its economy and military. A. Is that war is costing $220 million a day and has forced Israel to massively increase its government debt to fund the war. 3. There's massive food shortages and malnutrition in Gaza. A. Over 30,000 people have died. B. UN experts have predicted that widespread famine will become inevitable, with children particularly most vulnerable. Little I that the South China Morning Post said yesterday that over 576,000 people are one step away from wasting level famine. But 2. Within the next few weeks, tens of thousands are subject to die from famine if Israel continues. C. Israel has consistently blocked aid operations within Gaza. Little argues that most affects people in Gaza as they cannot find adequate food, water, or shelter. Links. 1. Iran can quickly build a nuclear arsenal, which gives them massive amounts of hard power. But 2. The announcement will immediately change the diplomatic situation. A. Iran now gains credible diplomatic leverage over Israel. Internal links. 1. Israel backs down. A. Netanyahu, who is low on political capital, would not want to fight the war on 2 fronts. Little I that Hezbollah, who is no first strike. Israel already knows about Iran's proxy groups and wants to avoid war at all costs. Iran has far-reaching powers within the region. But B. Mad checks back, which means that Israel does not first strike. But 2. Stops the invasion of Gaza. A. Solving for Yemen allows aid to get to Palestine. Aid blockades currently are preventing aid to getting into the status quo. B. And if you don't buy that, it still prevents spillover within the region because Iranian hard power outside of Israel checks back. Impacts. 1. Famine. After ground attacks and airstrikes, Israel has closed all airports available to giving food aid to Palestine. A little odd here that all the U.S. has recently attempted to send naval ships with food. There is few routes available that Israel has not attempted to spot. Also, there are very small ships which carry little amounts of food. But 2, Israel has stopped the ability to receive the little aid available. After the Red Line massacre recently, people are wary of going to food aid stations. But 3, 500 trucks have been stopped from entering the region. The Israeli government has been backlogging shipment by requiring full checks. But B, 576,000 individuals are at risk of starvation due to inability to access, especially relevant since Palestine's population is only 2 million people. But 2, structural violence. Palestinians have no location that they can stay. Israel has cornered them into a bad situation, which means that it is ontologically violent towards them because they think that they have nowhere else to go.
Can we get 3 like regional wars if it's still different?
This also always have time frames, the scope of infinite, but 3 regional wars because
So if the conflict is allowed to spill over, then it's like it leads to
if the conflict is allowed to spill over, lead to more conflicts in the region as other countries try to sort of contain Israeli influence and fight back. Next off. The role of the ballot is to evaluate the simulated consequences of the affirmative against competitive post-fiat policy option or the status quo. 1. Policy education is most rule applicable. Policy results in the structures of power that affect material living conditions, means most profitable and interlinked to all solvency. But B, it's critical to knowing the state to engage in the politics of the alternative. We must understand how to engage within the status quo. Little I does that the only way to interrogate the resolution avoids your policy failure. All see the political meaning that they can't solve. But 2, the state is inevitable. Empirics prove the state has historically gobbled up non-state societies. But B, the state is the main producer of knowledge, means that our epistemology and ontology is shaped by the state. But C, that means absent state engagement, chaos always get crushed. 3, policymaking fiat is good. Fiat is a prior question to agency because it imagines agency within the current system. This is a prior question to any all because no agency leads to nihilism and resentment. Little I here's that agency comes first since it creates subjectivity. You can't engage in epistemology or ontology absent self-conceptualization. This is why the affirmative is the only solvents for agency via fiat, means we unclear any K frameworks. 4, particulars are good. Even if violence is bad, it's good for groups like the Pink Pistols to be able to defend themselves.
5, explore affirmative and rural policymaking amendments still are still voted on under the original.
5, fixed flow affirmative because in rural policymaking, even if amendments are added to a bill, you still vote for the original bill name. So even if they read a picket, you still vote for affirmative. Anything else?
We have the text, evaluate the simulated consequences of the affirmative against a competitive post-fiat policy action or status quo.
Option or status quo. But yeah.
Options of action.
Yeah.
Great, straight now.
Does the construction of nuclear weapons happen?
We can tell you
Within a
we tell you what they're able to do.
Why isn't Iran building these nukes now?
I mean, we say first of all, like they have been like developing them, but it's not like their like foremost like it's not their like foremost goal right now, which is why even though they do have the ability to like produce them,
So they are developing them right now.
they're in the process.
they have like weapons grade uranium.
Yeah.
They're just like a step away from like building the bomb.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's not their top priority.
Order is going to be 2 off. Then a case stuff. You can put it on. I don't know. You can like put it on their background sheet if you want, or give it its own page, like whatever your heart so desires. And then it'll be the act in order. Actually, wait. Let me do that again. 2 off. Then I want the affirmative underview. Then it's going to be. Hold on. I'm getting myself confused. 2 off. Case dump on the affirmative. Then I want the affirmative under Q. Then the advantages in order. Great. And please let me know if I'm like clear enough, because this room is like the most echoey place I've ever been in. Okay. Is anyone not ready? No texts. I'm gonna go ahead and start. Now, interpretation: when the affirmative builds a nuclear weapons arsenal, they must specify the process by which the building happens. The explanation: according to the National Nuclear Security Administration, the process of building a nuclear weapons arsenal includes the following: A, procurement of nuclear material. 5 countries possess 2/3 of the world's known supply. B, uranium plutonium enrichment. High enrichment nuclear weapons need 93% enrichment. And C, construction of the weapon. According to the CIA in February, it wouldn't take long. The development of a delivery system that is capable of bypassing current nuclear missile defense systems are years out. They give you a timeline of a few months. Look to their warrant. Not 3 months out on a weapon. They're 3 months out on a delivery method. The violation is that the affirmative does not specify the process by which building happens. Standards. 1 is topic-specific education. The affirmative is operating in a world where they get to magically just have Iran have nuclear weapons. This is not how the process works in the real world. Iran is capable of enriching nuclear. Iran is not capable of enriching fissile nuclear material to 90% with relative ease. The resolution says arsenal. The point is that Iran does not have the capacity to create an arsenal of nuclear weapons. Look to the affirmative warrants. Nowhere does it say that they can create more than 1 nuke with their current stockpile. B is double bind. If they say that Iran does have nukes, then the affirmative isn't inherent, and you vote negative on presumption. If they admit so, then there's a time frame trade-off which turns the impacts of the affirmative. The little one is that even if Iranian sources use singular language when discussing their capability of producing a nuclear weapon, the literature is in the direction of the negative. C, the International Atomic Energy Agency oversees the buying and selling of all fissile nuclear material. At the very least, Iran would have to interact with this agency to procure weapons-grade plutonium. The little one is a terminal no-solve. If the affirmative doesn't specify the process by which Iran acquires nuclear material, then they have no warrants that they can make an arsenal. Second is predictable grounds. The negative's core offense in the case debate is Iran's capability of producing an arsenal. This is key to the negative's ability to compare time frame on impact level analysis. The A point is that the resolution states weapons arsenal, which necessitates the ramping up of current capabilities. The affirmative can't simply go for the argument. They can know it. Robs the negative of core ground to talk about the interconnectedness of nations that would require to broker a deal for a substantial amount of weapons-grade plutonium. The little one is that as well as the time frame for approval given, they go through conventional channels. Third is real-world education. We say that this is the most real world as it is a descriptive explanation of how a country must go about building a nuclear arsenal, allowing the affirmative to fiat literally 3 separate actions. Terminally skews the negative as we can only get access to single actions of fiat in the competition of the affirmative. The A point is that understanding how nations must interact with international agencies is key to real-world policymaking and portable skills outside of the round. The little one is that this also allows us to have realistic and sobering conversations about nuclear arsenals that aren't framed by existential crises. Voter? 1 is A prior, you have to know the rules of the game before you play the game. The sequence T is an issue that must be resolved first. Second is clash. We say that clash serves as the internal link to education is the best predictor of topics specific education and also works to ensure fairness as a process towards fairness requires clash of arguments. Third is real world education. We give descriptive claims about how the process of education spilled over to other spaces. You prefer our model of interrogation of adding new information into already existing scenes of information as the most likely type of education to create material impact. Fourth is competing interpretations. Prefer competing interpretations over reasonability as avoids judge intervention and a race to the bottom. Next stop. Disadvantage. Uniqueness. 1, more experts are already doing analysis now even on Iran or Israel without a nuclear Iran. Second, experts are said at the end of January that even in a pre-nuclear Iran, Israel can necessitate a limited nuclear response in a conflict. The A point is important to remember that while Israel is spending time in Gaza, Iran is still their #1 enemy. Third, Iran directly attacked an Israeli manned intelligence outpost in Iraq. Iran is developing its missile strike capabilities and securing itself by making its military ever more immune to first strikes against key missiles and nuclear facilities. Iran and its proxies also now have long-range high-precision missiles that can easily reach key Israeli targets. 4, for decades, most security analysts assumed Israel's nuclear weapons were only deployed to deter attacks that Iran would not dare to attack Israel directly. 5, Israeli intelligence already learned through war games that Israel's previous conventional strikes against Iranian nuclear and missile sites failed to show Iran's integration of nuclear warheads and missiles. 6, experts say that although Iran and Israel might initially seek to avoid the nuclear targeting of populations, such self-restraint is tenuous in the SWO. Links. 1, Israeli officials have already admitted that they might use weapons of mass destruction in Gaza. The plan increases their likelihood to first strike Iran. Second, Israel knows they cannot defend against nuclear strikes from Iran, which means the plan causes immediate panic from Israel and prompts them to first strike. 3, recently, Israel and Iran did a set of war games on February 27th that rose tensions and generated unique fear and resentment from both sides. This means that the brink is now. Internal links. One is recent war games. By non-proliferation policy, education centers are new and have created unique changes in comparison to war games run 2 years ago. Iran and Israel on the brink now, Iran nuclearization tips the conflict into spillover. The A point is the warrant. The 35 participants included Republicans and Democratic Hill staff, U.S. executive branch officials, and analysts. The B point, war games are based on a 2027 scenario passing plan, makes it a scenario coming into play 3 years earlier. The impacts? One is war. The A point is that proxy wars are uniquely bad because they generate a unique disposability and dehumanization through the generation of disposable population. Second is nuclear war. This happens if Iran and Israel go to war, particularly given the fact that Israel is spending its more traditional weapons on the destruction of Palestine. They'll be forced to go nuclear even if other conditions they wouldn't. The A point is spillover. The more proxy wars pop up, the more likely it is that they escalate to global war, especially in nuclear scenario. This leads to global war and total extinction via nuclear winter. The little one is that nuclear winter kills all life in a slow and painful manner, meaning the conditions of dehumanization and pain increase to a maximum and will inflict maximum suffering on the marginalized in the process. Go to the affirmative case now. On their plan. One is to turn the affirmative rushes the creation of nuclear weapons and causes nuclear disaster. According to the congressional research report from November of 2023, Tehran has capacity to produce nuclear weapons at some point, but does not have the mastery over the technology for building such weapons. The A point is that the IAEA reports that Iran does not have a viable nuclear weapons design nor a suitable explosive detonation system. Tehran also does not have the necessary experience in producing uranium metal. This is the little one is the double bind. Either Iran already has the capability to build nuclear weapons in the status quo and are doing so now, which makes the affirmative non-inherent, which is a stock voting issue, or they lack the capabilities now and force Iran to develop risky technology. Second, Kern, this jacks up Iran's military hegemony. This is uniquely bad for women in Iran because while women are fighting for their rights in many areas, they are not allowed to serve in the Iranian military, which means they have zero hands on the levers of military power and cannot take place in conversations about the use of any weapons or military. This increases otherization and violence already leveled against them. Third, this increases legitimacy to conduct violence. Violent repression of peaceful protest and pervasive institutional discrimination against women and other crimes against humanity. These are coming specifically through the Human Rights Council that explain extrajudicial and unlawful killings. Go to the underview. Okay, cool. It's policy. Go to the first uniqueness point. Go to the next disadvantage. One, we're going to say that uniqueness overwhelms the leak here. We tell you that there are too many other international organizations already at play here in Yemen. We see that the affirmative one is entirely extra topical in terms of the impact it's able to generate coming off of the sheet. There's no direct correlation between the building of a nuclear arsenal and the humanitarian aid that they hinge the entirety of their impacts on. Additionally, we would indicate that the drawing in of other global world powers that happen in the world of the affirmative means that global aid organizations are spread even thinner than they are right now in the flow. This link turns the entirety of the affirmative and means that their impact, one, becomes cyclical in the world of the affirmative, and second, become infinitely worse as resources are spread throughout other areas of the world. This disproportionately harms communities in Yemen that are already experiencing extreme marginalization in this flow right now. They are already being seen as disposable. The world of the affirmative serves to make that more cyclical. On the second, honor uniqueness, we're also saying uniqueness overwhelms the link. We tell you that the United States is working to build a flotilla right now that has the possibility to provide aid. This diversity is the entirety of the affirmative scenario. We tell you that there is a world where there is aid being provided. Oh, holy stuff, what do you want me to say?
They say they announce now.
They say they announce now. That's not the same equivalent as building now. This means that they're unable to trigger their impact scenario.
Or it means they have a year to actually develop weapons.
They have a year to develop the weapons. This means that the affirmative is always behind on time frame. Give the text.
Okay, when the affirmative builds a nuclear weapons arsenal, they must specify the process by which the building happens.
Yes.
Okay, what's that?
Yeah. Okay, good. We'll start with left stove. That's cool.
Why didn't you ask us what the mechanism was during flex?
Good at the problem.
What's that? With a problem. But you asked us other questions.
We found those questions more pressing.
So does Iran have missiles, like advanced missiles?
Like
Like you said, it needs
missiles.
weakness on the Jihad.
Yes, Iran has missiles.
Okay, are they advanced?
I don't know what your metric for advanced is. We'd say that they do have advanced missiles at the point where they have long capabilities that can strike this key Israeli targets.
Can you walk me through the link and internally on the Jihad?
Yeah, we say that Israel has already indicated that they're willing to use weapons of mass destruction, specifically in Gaza. We say that the affirmative plan causes reactionary panic from Israel and forces them to first strike against Iran, because now there's some threats to their authority over Western.
Is the first strike conventional or nuclear?
We'd say it could be both.
That's not more likely.
More likely. So proxy war is more likely, but both are very probable.
What were the three processes that you said on the interpretation?
The procurement of nuclear material, the uranium or plutonium enrichment, and the construction of a weapon.
We're just gonna be the spec sheet. And then, the disadvantage. And then the affirmative with the case stamp on top, and then advantage one, advantage two. Cool. Everyone good? Cool. Starting. Now on the spec sheet, first is an overview, reject spec shells on base. We tell you they're always going to be infinitely regressive. There's always an infinite number of things that we could have specified, which probably means the spec shells always force us and are always able to enable a form of violation, which is necessarily bad because there's infinite things that are possible to be requested to be specified. But then second, we say reject them because claims in parley are unverifiable without evidence. Their interpretation that the process requires like three stages that we must specify them are unverifiable because we can't call a card to check your verifiability, which probably means that there's no way to verify that the spec shell is true. But then three, we'd say that three, then we just say reject links of omission on base because there's an infinite number of things that we didn't do, which always means the links of omission are infinitely unpredictable, which probably means that you're always going to vote them down on the spec shell because they're creating a worse method for debate. But then on the counter interpretation, we'd say that the affirmative, when the affirmative builds a nuclear weapons arsenal, they need not specify the process by which the building happens. We say that this is probably going to be better. The reasons to other counter standards first is because it disables pick ground. We say like specific plan text incentivize pick ground, which we tell you is always going to be bad because kills topics of education, especially when the topic's only around for one round. We say picks forced us out of the core topic literature. But then second, we'd say the second counter standard is ground because ground if the app over specified, which always outweighs. We'd especially but then third is going to be critical thinking. We tell you that not specifying forces critical thinking in the block, which we tell you is always going to be the most portable skill that you get from debate. Fourth is going to be real world education because we tell you that the affirmative specification skews the negative out of providing warrants for why a certain process is going to be more, why a certain mechanism is going to be the most likely, which we tell you always outweighs on class education. It also turns their education voter because real world education is best gained through this critical thinking. And then five is going to be the NPDA bylaws that we tell you the text of the NPDA bylaw specifies that the judge should vote for the affirmative if they believe that they have successfully defended the resolution. Otherwise, vote for the negative. We tell you that this means the only burden of the affirmative is to affirm the resolution. We have no other burden, but we tell you go to the counter voters first. We tell you critical thinking is a prior question to all of their voters. We tell you that critical thinking is the only portable skill that you get from debate. We tell you that's an internal link to class education, and without critical thinking, both teams just read the same arguments as their back files without actually thinking about what they're saying. But then second, we say the bylaws short circuit all other voters because we tell you bylaws are always going to be best for access. They allow new debaters to actually engage in the format. We tell you there's a million unwritten rules about how you're supposed to engage in the format that kills any access for future debaters. We also tell you that this is and it's also the internal link to collaborative debate because if new debaters don't want to participate, then the activity dies and there's no way to gain education from it. We'd also tell you that there's going to be a really big we all just refer to the solvency. We tell you that Iran is already procured and enriched. It's just a matter of construction. That's literally in the background. We do meet then on the violation. We'd also tell you that they could have just asked this during flex, which means that it makes it a double bind. Either they already had prep responses, so they didn't need the flex time, so they could have just asked us, or they didn't have any responses prepared, which means that they would have had to wait until flex to prep them anyways because they were flowing during the PMC, which probably means that it's a double bind. You can just reject the spec shell on face. That makes it, and that means that there's an RBI on the spec sheet. You're always rejecting them on face for infinite regress and for the subverting the PDA bylaws, which leads to the collapse of debate. Cool. What do you put the responses? Cool. Go to the uniqueness. The uniqueness only points to Iran not having an integrated, quote unquote, mature nuclear arsenal, but we tell you that this doesn't directly respond to our particular background. We tell you that the report that we give you is more unique since it's from only a few months ago, and it indicates that Iran does have weapons-grade uranium already, and their own uniqueness points to Iran having advanced missile technology. But we tell you this means that the only lack that Iran faces is combining the two together. We tell you that that probably functions as they take out the uniqueness, but then we'd also tell you that we tell you in the uniqueness that they can see that they're able to build one bomb within a week, not within 3 months, but within a week, and 6 to 8 bombs within the next few months. That means that you probably buy that we are able to, there's no like time frame deficit. Okay.
One bomb is sufficient to trigger our links because it's
We tell you that one bomb is also going to be sufficient to trigger our links because it's like a nuclear weapon, which is always going to like just like be enough to enable like the deterrence that we give you. Cool. Go to the links. They say that Israel first strikes Iran. We tell you, no, that's not true for a few reasons. One, they can see that Matt checks back. This is from the first advantage. That probably means that you buy that Israel and Iran both having nuclear weapons means that neither one wants to strike the other because they know that they're always going to be struck back. But even then, we tell you that Israel is not going to want to start a conflict with Iran. It's not going to happen because that would lead to the creation of a war being fought on two fronts, like particularly like the invasion of like Palestine on one front and then fighting Iran on the other front. But they also concede our analysis that tells you that Iran has no desire to start a war with Iran because they know the strength of their proxy networks through like Hezbollah and stuff like that. That's literally a turn to the link. We say that the fact that Iran knows that, or the fact that Israel knows that Iran like has a big proxy network probably means that Israel doesn't want to start a conflict because they know that they're going to be like significantly outnumbered. That means that Israel knows that it's like always going to be in their best interest to prevent conflict.
Iran also has a strong conventional military. It has 5 times the size of Israel.
Iran also has a strong conventional military. It's 5 times Israel's. It's 5 times the strength of Israel's military, which means if anything, their links should have. We'd also tell you that they read you a bunch of warrants about war games, meaning that the brink is now, but we tell you that it's realized that the brink should have already passed insofar as they give you specific analysis that war games have been happening over the past few years. Probably means that they give you no specific warrant about why the war games that have occurred recently are uniquely key, but we probably tell you that the war games that have occurred recently are like uniquely not key insofar as Israel is preoccupied with conflict in Palestine and like scrutiny from the international order probably means
The war games don't check because they never predicted Israel would invade Gaza.
Secondly, we tell you war games uniquely aren't predictive. They didn't predict that Israel would invade Gaza, which probably means that war games are like that to go off in the first place. Cool. That means that you don't buy any of their impacts. Go to the case stump, or second to the case stump. Go to the case stump. First, they read you the turn on the solvency. They tell you that it rushes development because Iran doesn't have like tech mastery, doesn't have a viable design. They read you the double bind that either there's already nukes in the status quo or the development is going to be risky. We tell you no, they can see the analysis that one, Israel does not have nukes in the status quo, but that doesn't mean the development is going to be risky. Insofar as you can literally like use their analysis that there's like 3 stages of like nuclear weapon production. We tell you you in the background, Israel has already procured and enriched the uranium and plutonium, Iran has already procured and enriched the uranium and plutonium in the status quo, which probably means that the only phase that they have left is actually being able to like combine these and like synthesize these into an actual nuke, which means that the development is not going to be rushed, it will be safe.
Our uniqueness is more recent than theirs, which is why you're referring our uniqueness.
But secondly, we tell you our uniqueness is more recent than theirs. And we use a report from just like a few months ago, which means you're always preferring our uniqueness, even if they tell you their uniqueness that's older says that Iran's development is going to be rushed. We say that you probably buy that their development like not going to be rushed. But then third, we tell you that like any report is going to say that like they aren't ready for like nuclear weapons insofar as like it's like in the United States. It's insofar as like Western actors probably don't want Iran to have weapons, and so they're going to say that like they aren't prepared for them. But we say the way for Iran to get like prepared to have nuclear weapons is to actually like have nuclear weapons. Then on the turn about it hurting women because they can't engage in the military, we say, first of all, this is fundamentally non-unique. Whether or not Israel develops, or whether or not Iran develops nukes, doesn't change the fact that like women won't be able to work in the military, which probably means it's fundamentally non-unique. But then they try to say that, but then we say that in the world of the negative, and the status quo probably hurts women worse insofar as you can classify the humanitarian crises occurring in this quo. We tell you that which are uniquely harming women because they have a lack of access to resources. Then they try to say that we like increase legitimacy of violence. No, we like increase deterrence, which decreases violence on net. On the first advantage about Yemen, on the uniqueness, they say that there's like other like international like conflicts happening, but we tell you no, it's uniquely the Saudi Arabia like blocking aid that's like particularly the issue here, which is leading to like massive like humanitarian crisis. On the link level, they say that turn it because aid organizations are going to be spread even thinner, but we tell you no, that's not the scenario. We tell you that aid is already being sent, it's just being blocked, which means that in the world of the affirmative, the aid just gets unblocked, but the net aid stays the same, which probably means that it's not going to be spread thin. And so far as that should extend the internal link, that aid is solvent, they can see that, which means that you buy the genocide, structural violence, and famine is solved. On the second advantage, they say the uniqueness overwhelms the link. We tell you no, our uniqueness is more recent, which probably means that you buy it, but even then we'd say that Israel is like going to be deterred because they don't want to fight a 2-front war, which has always failed. Then they try to say that an announcement does not equal building, but we say that like any building of nuclear weapons is necessarily going to be like a big national undertaking, which means that it's always going to come with an announcement which we've used in the internal links and impacts of famine itself. Their structural violence. That's it.
Our conversation is just a company not specified.
Yeah, like,
I'm sorry. You say your uniqueness is more recent than ours. It's a report over Iran's ability to create weapons. Where does your report come from and what's its date?
The Council on Foreign Relations and, wait, what's the question?
Yeah,
When?
when does it, what's the date that you got it from?
Looked like December of last year, so 4 months ago.
Yeah, December. The US Council on Foreign Relations?
Our document says Council on Foreign Relations.
So it's probably.
And that report says that Iran can build a nuke within a week.
Yeah, and 6 to 8 bombs within the next week.
What is going to be the publicality sheet? We're going to go to the case stuff first, or second. So the publicality sheets, the case stuff, the disadvantage, and then advantage 1, advantage 2. Is anyone not ready? Yeah. On the spec sheet, you can see that we're not going to be going for this flow. The only thing I need to answer is the RVI. They agree 2 arguments about why spec is bad. First is that it's completely regressive. And the second is that it's the first NPDA noise. We say that 1 on regression, that this specific interpretation is necessarily key to identifying to holding the affirmative sticky office in the ground. We read a spec sheet specifically to the nuclear creation process. And the reason why you prefer the specificity of the spec sheet in round because it's actually key to establishing affirmative and negative ground in this debate. We say that this also doesn't subvert the NPDA bylaws because it's just a question of establishing norms and creating better norms. We pass text in between speeches each round, and that's not according to the bylaws, but still a norm, which means that we can still establish better norms. We indicate that this leads to better topic-specific education. They say real-world education is necessarily key, so we agree on these ideas. Also, they have no interpretation or voters for this RVI, which means you don't grant them any of these new arguments in the PMR. You don't vote on it because it's not a real RVI. They don't give you a way to vote on it. Background or case stuff? They say on the argument that the Russian creation is that it's not true because they reread a report from December that says they can build it within a week. This is an entire double mind on the uniqueness that we said this is say proves the affirmative is the hydro presumption claim. If it is true that Iran can build a nuclear weapon within a week from December, then why haven't they built it already? Their only answer inflection is because it's not a priority. But even if it's not a priority, if it can only be constructed within a week, it probably wouldn't happen over the course of 4 months by now. This probably means that 1, this argument is either not true, or 2 is that it's entirely non-inherent, which means there's no reason for you to vote affirmative because Iran already has nuclear weapons. That means you can immediately vote negative on presumption, even if you don't buy that. We say the announcement that necessarily triggers the links on the dissent is going to be a unique reason why they're still voting off in the world, even in the world in which Iran already has nuclear weapons. We necessarily prefer the evidence on our report from the Congressional Office report, because not only does it cite evidence from the U.S. Congressional report, but also evidence from the International Agency on Atomic Energy.
Yeah.
International Agency on Atomic Energy is specifically saying that Iran does not have the necessary material. They indicate in the PMC that they have the necessary fissile material, the necessary plutonium or uranium to construct those missiles. But we necessarily say that they don't have the right technology to build that, i.e. the kind of metal that is necessarily needed to create these bombs in the first place, that it needs to be infused with the uranium. We necessarily say that this process at least will take 1 year for them to develop, which means that all of their solvency on their advantages have a lack of time frame, because even when they make the announcement that they have the nuclear weapons, they don't actually have the material bombs, which means that other countries are always going to intervene and backlash against them before they actually have the chance to develop the capabilities, which is the reason why they trigger the impacts of the dissent before they even get close to accessing any of their solvency on their case. This, yeah. Yep. Yep. Additionally, you can say the third case here on increasing violence. They say that our argument on the second argument is non-unique because women can't work in the military anyways. Okay, we're not going to be going for that argument. We're going to be going for the argument that leads to the legitimization of violence. We say in the world in which Iran is able to develop nuclear weapons, it increases their hegemony tenfold, because then they have the extinction levels of violence that came at their disposal, which is the reason why they are able to justify an increasing amount of violence that go right now. They say that this doesn't happen because they increase deterrence. That's deterrence against other countries, but they ignore the violence that's happening within Iran right now. Which is the kind of extrajudicial killings and torture the women in status quo are going to go up in the world in which you give Iran massive increase to the hegemonic military power. They have conceded this argument, which is the independent floating offense against the affirmative plan, which is the reason why you can vote on these cases. Then you don't give them any access to their solvency on solving structural violence, and they perpetuate massive forms of patriarchal structural violence in the world of the affirmative. Anything else? They conceded this. We'll give them new answers. Sad. second, I need to figure out what. You can cross-apply all the arguments I made on the case stuff before. If we necessarily say the link on here is going to be the announcement that Iran has the nuclear weapons at the point, you also consider the double bind on the inherency. They say Iran already has matured arsenal now. If that's true, then you have no reason to vote affirmative. Their only indication is that they just need to spend a week to put those two things together. But we say if it's just a process of putting two things together that takes a week, that's what already would have happened. We can vote negative on presumption. They say that they can. They say Matt checks back, but they ignore the scenario that we necessarily say here. We indicate that the congressional report and also the International Atomic Energy Agency, that all strips me up, says that Iran needs specifically on 1 year to actually develop a nuclear bomb, which means that Matt doesn't check back at the point where there is a 1 year time frame for Israel to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons after they announce that they're going to develop them. They their own articulation on their vote, their advantages is that Iran will make the announcement they're developing nukes, which is the trigger for the links on this disadvantage and the reason why there's going to be war now. They say that on the proxy arguments. Oh, they say Israel has no desire to start war. We say they do have a desire to start war. I don't where it's an existential Iran having nuclear weapons is an existential threat. You can cross-play unique analysis that gives you that one that Israel's main enemy is Iran, even concerning the ongoing disaster in Gaza, which is the reason why the affirmative plan necessarily triggers. If Iran has the strong conventional military, that's another reason why Israel will be incentivized to strike first, because in a world where Matt exists, Israel will still lose the conventional warfare, which means the status quo is the only time for Israel to actually gain an advantage and actually win the war right now, which is the first striking war. Their only war is Matt checks back. When I answered that above, they say the brink should have be passed now because of the ongoing war games. We say the war games happened in February, which means the brink is right now. There haven't been any unique scenarios to actually trigger that scenario. They also say that they also thump that on unique when they say Israel is preoccupied in the Gaza conflict, which is the reason why when Iran suddenly declares that they're going to create nuclear bombs, Israel now is forced to actually distract them from their attention from the Gaza war and strike against Iran to prevent that from happening, which is the reason why they don't apply. They also say war games have been going on for 2 years. That's not true. We say war games happened 2 years ago, but are different from the war games that happened 2 months ago. And the 2 months ago analysis is the uniqueness you should be referring in this debate. This means you can cleanly extend our links here about which means we get access to our internal links. You can extend that there's immediate panic from Israel that causes them to first strike and cause war right now. Even if you know about which is the scenario that we're going to be going for. We're not going to be going for a proxy war. You can extend the impact on nuclear war causes extinction. This massively outweighs all of the affirmative impacts because they only get access to low-level structural impacts. Movies necessarily say that nuclear war outweighs the point where it kills everyone in terms of magnitude, but also it includes the ability for you to even solve the humanitarian crisis, because you can't solve this crisis if everyone's already dead, because we're already dead from nuclear winter, which is the reason why we are winning both on in terms of magnitude, but also we see the negative, the affirmative impact in this round. Cool. Go to the first advantage.
Oh, it recreates cycles of disability.
Oh, we also say that the nuclear winter recreates cycles of dismissibility. First advantage. They say that aid is being blocked out. We say that you have no solvency to aid. You have a one year time frame deficit between the announcement of your plan and actual creation of nuclear weapons. That's the entire case that we give you right now, which means that Saudi Arabia will still be blocking the aid because they have no incentive to actually not block aid at the point where Iran doesn't actually have the nuclear weapons. And even if they do have the nuclear weapons, they should have had them since a week after December. So they don't have any solvency, which means they don't even solve it. We also say, this is for sorry. We also say that it's still distracted to detract from other kind of aid, because the aid is not just sitting out there waiting for the aid is not just trucks sitting at the border waiting for something that will never happen, which means that they still necessarily detract other kinds of aid, which means that there's no net sum of aid being accessed in this world of the affirmative. We also say that disadvantage still outweighs in terms of time frame and magnitude because it happens sooner and also precludes the ability for aid to happen in the first place. Go to the second advantage. They can see that the United States is building a flotilla right now. This flotilla will give 2 million meals to people in Gaza every single day, which is the reason why their impacts are still solved. They say that we can't solve other kinds of aid, but then they can see this warrant on the US building the flotilla right now. And we'll give them new answers to this in the PMR. We'd also say that this still outweighs in terms of time frame. We need time frame and probability and also magnitude, which is the reason why you still prefer our negative impacts in this round. Cool. Okay.
We're just going to be brief overview on top. We're really going to have that next door. Okay. It's going to be brief overview on top. Then I want the case stone. I put on the negative. I'm the negative. Case stone I put on the off. Then it's going to be the disadvantage. Then the advantages in order. I can do that. I lost my other. Yeah, let me find my other. That's bad. Okay. Oh, I have it. I like. Okay. Order is going to be brief overview on top, just like thesis level claims about things. Then I want to go to the affirmative case sum. Then I want to go to the negatives disadvantage, then the advantages in order. Cool. And please yell at me if I need to be louder, everyone. Cool. Yes. And I can pause a second between sheets if that would be useful. Cool. Then I'm going to go ahead and start 4 minutes now. It's a clean vote for the negative from Whitman at the point that the affirmative has still been unable to respond to the double bind we put on the entirety of case. This proves that either one, the affirmative is not inherent and you vote negative on presumption. This argument is not conceded throughout the last affirmative speech. Don't grant the new answers to it now. Or second, they're always going to be behind in terms of time frame, which means you sequence the negative ahead in terms of our ability to resolve our impacts in terms of time frame. Go to the case sum now. We're going to be stating really hard on the first paper I read. This explains to you that the affirmative rushes the creation of nuclear weapons and causes nuclear disaster. This triggers the impact theory that they sit on and supercharges the fact that aid is spread even thinner in the world of the affirmative. Additionally, you buy the articulations coming out of the negative that any kind of nuclear war scenario is an existential risk at the point that it has the possibility to wipe out all life everywhere. This means that you prefer the negatives analysis on this point that we tell you that the creation of nuclear weapons causes disaster. That's the scenario that the affirmative tells you. Additionally, we're going to sit really hard here on the articulations that either they have the capability or they lack the capabilities now and forces them to develop risky technology. The risky technology arguments have got dropped by the affirmative throughout the entirety of this debate. Don't grant them new answers now. We say that risky technology also serves as a separate internal link to continued proliferation of violence. On the third case turn, we're going to say that violence legitimizes more internal violence. This means that the negative is the only team with access to other kinds of internal impacts specific to Iran. This gives you a unique separate place to vote negative at the point that we're able to indicate that we reduce internal violence through not letting Iran become more of a hegemonic power that uniquely discriminates against women. This gives you a unique reason to vote negative. Anything else? Cool. Go to the disadvantage now. There's too much conceded on this sheet for you to be voting anything but negative. We're going to cross-apply the case strengths here again. We tell you that they're going to be a year behind, and then all the affirmative does is make an announcement. They're going to try to squirrel out of this argument in the PMR. No, they've dropped all the analysis we read to you. That's literally from within the last 3 months that explains to you exactly why they're going to be behind in terms of time frame. This means you prefer the negative's ability to resolve more impacts. Additionally, we would articulate that the magnitudinal impacts that the negative is able to prevent are going to supersede any impacts that the affirmative sits on. Especially the point that there's no point in providing humanitarian aid if you're all dead in a nuclear fallout. This means that you prefer the articulation coming out of the negative through our ability to resolve on the links. I just need to cleanly extend I just need to cleanly extend the second and third link here. We say that Israel knows they cannot defend against nuclear strike, which means the plan causes immediate panic. This is what triggers the worst scenario that Gold's conceded. This means that in the world of the affirmative, you are voting on a guaranteed war scenario. Second, I'm going to extend across the third link here that says that they did a set of work in literally the end of February. This means that our analysis is always going to be ahead in terms of this scenario on the impacts. Nuclear winter outweighs and precludes any of the impacts they're going to sit on in their next speech. This means that it's a clean vote for the negative in order to prevent nuclear disaster. Go to the advantage. The only argument I need to set on here is that there's no net sum of increase in aid that's given to people in Yemen. We say that they're unable to provide this aid, one, in part due to other disasters that are ongoing, and second, due to the fact that the affirmative supercharges the numbers of disasters that happen internationally due to an increase in proliferation of violence through the arms race that happens in the world of the affirmative. On the second advantage, they drop the articulation that turns the entirety of it. The U.S. is building a flotilla right now, which means we have the better ability to solve the impact in the world of the negative. It's a clean vote for the negative at the point that we're ahead in terms of both magnitude and time frame. You vote for Whitman.
Why does Matt not check back?
What?
Why does Matt not check back again?
Because Iran's not gonna have a nuclear weapon to check back for a year.
The order, it's probably gonna be a new sheet, but the order is just basically gonna go case stem, add one, add two, decide. Everyone good? Sound good. All right. Let's make the affirmative story clear. Iran can and will build a nuclear arsenal within a week post-fiat. We just don't know when exactly. We argued it's imperative they build it now because the timeframe for solving for the Israeli invasion of Palestine is now. Go to the case stuff. Go to the double line. You are not voting here. Extend the first background point that's been conceded since the PMC. Iran building a nuclear arsenal is inevitable. It is only a question of when they build it. We argue it is key for Iran to build a nuclear arsenal right now. The reason why Iran hasn't built it yet is because they had other priorities, which is the conceded articulation that Kyle has given you since the MG. Realize that they don't have any warrants for why Iran should have built it already. They just say they should if they hadn't. But our argument is that Iran had other priorities. For example, maintaining national security, which is the conceded warrant as to why Iran hasn't built them. That doesn't mean you can't build them. They just haven't decided to. That's the only word you give. You vote there, or you err on outside there. On the violence turn. You are voting for the affirmative on this. It's right. They conceded the Iranian hegemony increases by 10-fold, which triggers the link for both the advantages. Either you buy the link that Iran hedge increases, which Israel feels scared and doesn't invade and Saudi's back up in Yemen, or at worst, you're not voting here because it's terminalized with violence against women and marginalized populations, which they concede is non-unique. Good advantage.
And which is worse than the world of the egg because
And which is worse than the world of the egg
because they're always hurt most by like structural violence.
because they're hurt the most by social violence. Go to advantage one. It doesn't matter since they don't contextualize what aid is getting traded off. You don't exactly know what you're voting for there. On advantage two, this is where you're voting for the affirmative. The only really response they give us is that Iran would have a nuclear weapon a year away. Cross-extend every single articulation that we've given you throughout the round that our uniqueness trumps theirs. Our uniqueness is the most recent. This has not been contested since the PMC, which means Iran A has enough uranium to enrich within a week. B, that they have advanced missile technology, which is their own uniqueness. This means that Iran has the capabilities to build a bomb within a week. We're the only team that gives you the warrant as to why they're capable. They just say they don't. This means you're buying articulation that Iran can build a weapon within a week, which is either going to mean that Matt checks back against or dissent, so you're voting for the risk of solvency on the Palestinian impact of structural violence, or you believe that Matt doesn't check back and you vote for the impact of regional war spilling over, and that leads to the most internal link towards global nuclear war, which means other greater powers get drawn in the West Asia area, which is why nuclear war happens. So we're always going to be the best solvents for the dissad. Extend the links. Even if you do think there's a non-unique on the aid part, realize that the link into nuclear war and conflict isn't dependent on aid. Our link is specific that Israel will back down on the conflict in Gaza because Netanyahu can't afford a war on both fronts, which is why he's going to back down from Gaza, and he doesn't have the political capital to support either wars. This means that the conflict stops, which is why the internal link scenario is going to be uniquely key, which has been conceded since the PMR, or PMC, so you have 100% probability as to why that's happening. So it's the most probable, most clearest place for you to vote. Anything else? This means that we are fighting the best internal link and link turning the dissad on face by preventing a global nuclear war from happening. Extend all their impact money about why nuclear war and nuclear winter is the most important impact. So the second that you buy them, we have a risk of solvency. It's going to be to try or die for the affirmative.
I think the internal link turn on the dissad is PMR.
I'm just comparing worlds, like how regional wars spill into global wars. At worst, you're extending the conceded regional spillover argument means that we're still net solving back for more conflicts that inevitably lead to conflict, which is what their link is anyway. So we're always going to be a prior question. Anything else? Okay. Here's how you should frame the impacts. They try to say that nuclear war always comes first because extinction has a maximum magnitude and precludes solvency for the outcome on time frame. First, there's no extended warrant for a time frame. First, structural violence on time frame way because it's happening in the school. And we tell you the brink is now to stop thousands from dying of famine in Gaza. We also tell you that structural violence outweighs the magnitude. Extinction is a one-time event, while structural violence is an inescapable generational ongoing process. Structural violence occurs with infinitely greater magnitude than extinction. If you need a tiebreaker, use probabilities. And structural violence is occurring in the status quo due to aid blockade is conceded since the PMC. We also tell you that they extend the second advantage, stops for regional spillover, which they also concede there's a nuclear war scenario in both worlds, but it gets conceded in the world of the affirmative since there's no match check back. Go to the dissad. There's way too much conceded defense that you're ever going to be possibly thinking of voting for the dissent. To the point where the conceded defense, it means like the second you find there's a risk of offense for the affirmative, you vote out. Go to the conceded defense. Realize that they also dropped a key background point about how in the past when nuclear powers developed, there's no reason why there's a spill or there's no first strike. With the articulation that we give you since the PMC about how when US-USSR conflict or North Korea developed a nuclear weapon, there's no first strike scenario, which means that the uniqueness inherently checked facts against their link, which means the uniqueness overwhelms the link that there's no reason why you're fighting the dissent, which is one of the only risk of solving for regional spillovers since they have no.
Pretty sure this argument is new, I don't have it.
This is from the framework or the background page of the PMC, which is what causes it. But second, we are the only thing that gives you a warrant as to why Israel does not want to go to war with Iran. They concede that Netanyahu does not have the political capital to do this. But second, they concede that Iran's military is a lot more powerful than Israel. Probably means that Israel does not want a war on two fronts, which means that they either stop the war in Gaza, which means that we fall back for the regional war spillover, or they do not want to fight this war at all, which means that they don't fight Iran and there's no new war scenario, which means that you're going to vote for the affirmative on the risk of us solving for the famine in Palestine. So TLDR, the case dump doesn't matter. We're gaining access to our internal link and impact scenarios that have all been conceded since the PMC, so it's the cleanest play for you to vote. And the conceded defense on the dissent means that you're always going to be voting F on the risk of solvency.
Good round.
Good round.